So rewinding the tape, you had early success with the Highwaymen, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that was what was the story with that? You grew up in Memphis and
I met a guy named Chip Moman, who was a big record producer in Memphis and then moved up here and had great success here. And the powers that be in Memphis in the mid 80s made him a sweet deal to come back to Memphis and try to revive the industry, you know. And so he had a studio down there. Anyway, I met him and he signed me as a writer. I was a junior at Ole Miss, but he made me promise I'd go back and get my degree or he'd quit paying me, you know. And so I didn't want to go back to school my senior year, but I did go, and I'm really glad I did because I had a ball my senior year. But he called me one day and just said, "Have you heard of the Highwaymen?" I said, "No." He said, "Well, it's Willie, Waylon, Cash, and Kris Kristofferson." I said, "Yeah, I've heard of those guys." And he said, "Well, that's the Highwaymen." I said, "Okay." You know, what about them? "Well, you know the song The Highwaymen." And I said, "No, I don't." And he says, you really don't like country music, do you, kid?" And I said, "No, sir, I really don't. I like, you know, soul music and R&B and rock, blues, that kind of stuff." He said, "Well, go buy the single, The Highwayman, and write me the sequel. This would be a good exercise for you." And when he used the word exercise or something in me, there was a little offended because I'm a professional at this point. I'm getting $100 a week to write songs. And I went down to the record store. We used to have those back then. Y'all, have you ever heard of these record stores? You heard of these?
No, I've heard about dinosaurs. And,
Exactly.
You know, archaic times.
They had these things, the cassette tapeosaurus back then. And I bought the cassette tape and brought it back to this little rat hole I was living in with these two other guys. And I'd gone out that night. And I came back and I said, "Well, I need to probably listen to that song." And I literally thought to myself, if I'm going to have to listen to country music, I had no clue. But I thought, if I'm going to listen to country music, I'm going to have to adjust my attitude a little bit. And so I smoked about 3 bowls and hit play. And if you know the song The Highwayman, it's deep and it's out there. But it was, I listened to it about 50 times. I remember thinking, if this is country music, what have I been doing all this time, you know? So I stayed up all night and wrote this song and drove to Memphis the next evening to play it for Chips. And I had called him and told him I was coming. He said, "Sure." And I got there and he had a fence around his place and a gate, a keypad there to open the gate. And the code he had given me didn't work. Well, what I was too naive to know was that he didn't want to deal with me, you know, not that moment. But I tried everything I could, not honking my horn and flashing my bright lights, you know, and I could see people up in the house, you know, silhouettes through the windows moving around. I knew he was home. So I thought, well, I must have written the code down wrong or whatever. And I thought, well, he just doesn't know I'm down here. So I jumped over his fence and cops came, the whole deal. But I played him my song and he crushed out a cool Filter King cigarette. And he said, "I'm going to go into the studio with those boys and just to cut that song." I thought, great. Well, we'd been doing demos up here, and he called me. He said, "Can you be in Nashville on Monday?" And I said, "Sure." I drove up here. I thought we were going to be doing demos or something, and I opened the door to what back then was Emerald Studio. Now it's like Warner commercial music or production music, something. But it was like the state-of-the-art studio back then. I thought, holy cow, man, he's going to take me in here and cut me in this studio. This is going to be great. And I opened the door, and there's Willie Nelson, Waylon Jennings, Johnny Cash, and Kris Kristofferson. And the room got kind of quiet, and he says, "Ria, play your song for these boys." And I sat down in the middle of the floor, and I borrowed a capo from Glenn Campbell. He was there too. And played him my song. And when I got finished, Kristofferson, he says, "Well, hell, that's right up our alley." And,
is that before or after you wiped your?
Yeah, trust me.
You know.
I mean, I was, there's no question about it. Sitting in front of those guys, I remember panicking briefly.
Yeah.
And there was something in me that just said, "Look, this is what you do. Be cool, do it." You know? And so I just held it. And at one point I was in the vocal booth with Johnny Cash, kind of helping him with the melody, teaching it to him. And when I came back in the control room, Waylon was at the console and he looked over at me and he said, "Hey, kid." I said, "Yeah." And everybody gets quiet because all those guys are icons, you know, and they had a very commanding presence. Some people just walk in a room and everybody, all eyes are on them. And they were certainly like that. So,
sorry, you're fighting that.
yeah, that's all right. So, he says, kid, we scared out there in that room with Johnny Cash. And everybody looks at me, and I said, I was 21, man. I will give it up for anybody. I said, no, sir, I wasn't scared. And he literally gave me the once over. He looks at me and he goes, shit. And I might have at that point. I don't know.
I
didn't know that story. That's awesome.
I didn't either. Okay, if you were going to go back to pre that moment and you were going to give yourself advice, having walked the years since, what would you say to yourself?
Don't worry about offending somebody. Just be you. I felt like a astronaut that had been in space for, you know, years, and all of a sudden I'm back in society because it was such an alien society to me. And these guys were super famous, and they had all the powerful people in the record business there, and I was scared to death of saying or doing the wrong thing, you know, and so I just kind of was a wallflower, more or less. I tell people, even in my faith, I can't be somebody I'm not. I don't know how to be anybody but me. And that's going to mean that I can't get along with some people. It's going to mean that I offend some people. And it's going to mean that some people are going to think that I'm not a real believer, you know, and that's okay too.